Hello and welcome to another episode of Back to Britpop. It's me, Chris. On this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Owen Powell of the band Catatonia. It's a fantastic chat with Owen. He goes into some lovely detail about the band's formative years, his involvement with songwriting for the band, and what it was like touring and recording. We also talk a lot about his other musical projects that he's been involved with and his new material under the pseudonym Don Yaya, which is amazing stuff. And I'm going to put some links to his music in the show notes. Please check that out because it's fantastic. As always, I'll be back at the end of the interview to talk about all the ways that you can support this podcast. But in the meantime, here's Owen. Welcome to the podcast, Owen Powell. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Chris. Very good indeed.
Whereabouts in the world are you right now?
I'm in deepest, darkest West Wales, a very rural area, north end of Carmarthenshire, not far from the border with Pembrokeshire. It's very dark and it's very quiet here, and the dog is asleep, which is good news.
A good sign. Yeah,
always a good sign.
I always ask it these sort of at the beginning of the podcast episodes, and it's probably getting very repetitive. Actually, I know it's getting very repetitive about COVID and lockdown and things and how it's affected you, but you've managed to be extremely productive, haven't you, in the kind of last 18 to 20 months or so?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with technology nowadays. I mean, I've got I would hesitate to call it a studio in my house. It's actually a tiny little room, and I've got sort of my Mac and my recording equipment and my guitars. So I've managed to carry on working really, which has been great. Contributed to an album for Mark Roberts, the other guitar player in Catatonia, who's got an ongoing project called Mr. So he's now on his fourth album of that.
Okay.
So we made all of that by just bouncing files back and forward over the internet. So it's the first time I've made an album like that, and it's actually quite enjoyable. You get a file with the bits that he's done and the bits that other people have done. Paul from Catatonia has been contributing as well, and Osian Gwynedd, who plays keys in Griff Rhys's band, and so We've done that album. It's a Welsh language album called Virus, which means virus. And in the time that Mark was waiting to release it, he's gone and recorded another one as well.
Oh, crikey.
Very quickly, yeah.
Have you found sort of then this situation has opened up other avenues that you may well have not have scoffed at before, and then as you think actually this is actually quite an efficient way of working?
It's a really efficient way of working. It's one that more and more people are doing, particularly songwriters and producers. I can see it being a lot more difficult for bands because obviously part of the joy and part of the excitement and part of the purpose of being in a band is that you've got a group of people in a room, and obviously the energy that gives to songwriting, to recording, to playing live can't be replicated online. However, for producers, songwriters, engineers and things, it's actually quite a good way of working. You can download the files, wait until you've got a quiet couple of hours, have time to review things. And it's funny because of course every musician will say, oh yeah, I love working this way, it's great, and be independent. But the thrill of being in a recording studio doing things that way is irreplaceable, really.
Yeah, bouncing off each other and coming up with new ideas in the room is pretty priceless, isn't it?
It is, and that's that's basically what gets most people into bands in the first place. You learn an instrument when you're in your teenage years, and most people the first thing you want to do is be in a band, and that moment where you first set foot, I don't know, you usually rehearse first of all in somebody's bedroom, and then you gravitate to the lounge of somebody's house when you find a drummer, then the neighbours complain and you have to start looking for rehearsal rooms. But yeah, that's part of the thrill of making music, is especially, bands, ensembles, things like that, is, it's a really natural way of performing music. And it's very enjoyable. I've made some of my closest friends that I've ever had through music, and the internet will never replace that.
Before we get onto sort of your your sort of solo album that you've released and all solo material that's coming out. Whilst
Mm.
you're on the subject of going back, I mean, how did it all start for you? Did you always have music in the family, or were you quite different from, other siblings or parents?
No, there was mum and dad loved music. My dad was really into the Beatles, the Stones, Jimi Hendrix, and my mum was really into sort of all the Motown stuff, Bob Marley, particularly Stevie Wonder. She's a massive Stevie Wonder fan. But no, there was no real musicality in the family. The one thing I do remember is that my mum always said that I was always obsessed with the radio, and I could sing every song in the top 40 more or less. I knew all of the words. And she always used to say, "Oh, it's a shame you can't learn maths the way that you learn the songs in the top 40."
Yeah.
But everything has its purpose. There's a reason for everything. And I was pretty obsessed with pop music from like 5 or 6, I think. Yeah.
And picking up the guitar, what was the instigator there?
I stole a guitar from my uncle. Is the truth of it. There was a guitar lying around in my grandmother's house, and I didn't steal it. I borrowed it. And of course, I didn't know how to tune it, so I spent about 2 years just making a racket with it. And then when somebody told me that there was actually a way to tune a guitar, the standard tune in the A, D, G, B, E, I was a bit disappointed because I'd spent 2 years learning how to play songs without that, and I had to relearn everything. But from then on, that's really all I did. I mean, between the age of like 14 and 20, that's all I did was play guitar. I played guitar in my room. I played guitar all over the house. I used to lie in the dark playing guitar. And my mum used to go, why don't you go down the pub with your friends? Like, I'm pretty happy playing the guitar, actually. That was really all I did. It kept me a lot of trouble.
Did you have any sort of guitar heroes? Who would have been sort of the influences there?
Sort of early teens, sort of pre early days of indie rock. I was obviously, every guitarist pretty much loves Jimi Hendrix. So it was Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page, Keith Richards. But then when I sort of got into bands like the Smiths and Echo and the Bunnymen, I mean, Will Sargent was a massive influence on me. I think they were probably my first musical love, my first musical crush. I was absolutely obsessed with how Will Sargent got those sounds, and the fact that he played guitar so differently to, most rock guitars is based around, basically it's based around the blues. You can look at Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, and Keith Richards, and it kind of, they're steeped in the blues, whereas Will Sargent seemed to be, I didn't know where it was coming from. It sounded more like music from the East. It was a very different, and it was a lot more about creating atmospheres than it was just about playing melodies, and I think that really appealed to me.
And so when it came to sort of writing your own compositions and songwriting, I mean, was there a moment that you remember where you're thinking, actually, this is something I could do?
Well, I was in a couple of bands before Catatonia. I was in a punk band called Utant, who were based in Cardiff, and we kind of all wrote together. And then I was in a band with my brother and some really good friends called Crumblowers, where we all wrote together. So there was no actual, we wrote more by writing riffs and by jamming together. The sitting down and actually writing a song from beginning to end, where you write the chords, the melodies, and the lyrics, that really didn't start until just before Catatonia, really. And I my early attempts at doing it weren't very good. They were very disjointed, and I did that thing that a lot of young songwriters do, which is I wrote way too many bits, and they had way too many chords, and they were way too long. When you listen to the greats, when you listen to Neil Young, when you listen to Otis Redding, when you listen to Bob Dylan, you realize how simple most of the songs are, that they're 4 chords and really good lyrics, and I think that's when it clicked, really. Yeah, I can assure my early attempts were pretty awful.
I mean, if we could talk about Catatonia and the early days of the band, you joined kind of after the band was already sort of well established in a way. They'd kind of been playing or had some sort of recordings
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
And so, and you're in a band, Colour 45, and
Yeah.
but you all knew each other. How did that transition into some sort of Colour 45 happen, and when were you recruited, and what was the story there?
I'd been in a couple of bands, so I'd known Mark and Paul. Mark, the guitarist in Catatonia, and Paul, the bassist. But I'd known Keris since we were kids. She used to live down the road from me, literally a couple of 100 yards, and we used to go to school together. So kind of everybody in that band knew each other. But you're right, I was actually the last person to join. Not long after the band had just finished recording the first album, Way Beyond Blue, and I joined as Stephen Street and John Smith were mixing that album in Maison Rouge Studios in Fulham Road. And it's funny actually because him and Stephen and John would be mixing the album in the control room in Maison Rouge, and we'd actually set up the full band, and we'd be rehearsing in the live room for the gigs that we had booked, which is not the ideal way to mix an album with a band like literally thrashing away at gig volume in the next room. But they were very patient with us, and it was always funny because I mean I'd literally gone from playing in a band with my brother and my best friends, and Mark and Keris had asked me, "Oh, you know, do you want to come and join the band?" And I'd literally, you know, I left Cardiff with a guitar case with a couple of pairs of pants and t-shirts stuffed away in it and a pedal board in a rucksack. The next minute I was standing in Maison Rouge studio with Stephen Street poking his head around the door going, "Oh, sounds really good." And it's like, it was like sort of like being fast tracked or sort of joining a Premier League football club when you know, been playing for Accrington Stanley. Not that that's a diss against band that I was, you know, I've got to be very careful what I say because they are all my very, very good friends. So, one of them is my brother as well.
Oh,
and
wow.
he's bigger and harder than me. So yeah.
It must have been quite obviously a whirlwind then for you in terms of just the band was had their sights set on you know, bigger things. They were going places, and obviously there was turbulence there as well, and there was chaos. But was that really attractive as well as sort of exciting?
Well, yeah, because the thing was, the only thing I'd ever wanted to do since I was really young, my dad took me to see Thin Lizzy when I was, I think, 13 in the Fire Gardens in Cardiff, and that just changed my life. It was from then on, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be in a band, and you know, to actually be in a band that were releasing records, or who were going to be releasing records, and you know, who had equipment and who had shows lined up. But it was very special for me as well because I already had a very close bond with Keris, with Mark, and with Paul, and Aled, who was the drummer. You know, I got on really, really well with him, like from day one. And it was very much, we were like the last gang in town. We did everything together. You know, we rehearsed together, we recorded together, we drank together, we had fights together, we, you know, painted the town red, and we really were like a gang, a proper gang at that time.
You were used to having this kind of collective songwriting atmosphere or scenario, and that was definitely something that continued with Catatonia as well, wasn't it? You were welcome to write songs together.
It was funny because it was never discussed when I joined, because Mark and Keris were writing all the songs together, and you know, the first album it's a really strong album of, you know, pop tinged and then slightly darker things. And I didn't at that point, I wasn't even thinking about the writing side of it. I kind of chipped in a few things to some of the B-sides that we did for that album. And then the first song that I wrote beginning to end and then played it to them was Strange Glue, which was recorded then for the second album, International Velvet. And I remember I'd written it sort of the early hours of the morning in a house that I was sharing with a bunch of other people in Cardiff. And I must have recorded it on a cassette player that I then put back in the guitar case because I'd completely forgotten about it the next morning, and rewound it and played it. I thought, oh, that's actually not bad, apart from the drunken bloke who's singing it, which was me. So I thought I rang Keris, and she lived just down the road from me, and I went over and played it to her, and she really liked it, and she said, "Oh, well, let's do it." And I remember thinking, "Oh, this, I'm not sure how this is going to go down, because there's definitely a songwriting partnership in this band already. I don't want to be, trampling all over that." But it was actually it was welcomed, which was nice, because I'd not anticipated being in that position in the band. It had never been discussed, so it was good, and it showed how open they were as people, how open everybody in the band was to having other things brought in, because a lot of bands, they would have said, "Oh, no way," the songwriters, like Mick and Keith in the Stones. It's like, no, they're the songwriters, and then you've got Ron Wood waiting, 30 years to get it. Apparently, that's what he says anyway.
With this massive
No, it
portfolio.
it wasn't like that at all. It was very open.
And so this gang that you joined and were on this kind of the precipice of something fantastic, and almost domination in terms of like the record sales, and the second album did incredibly well. But I mean, there are lots of stories, and I remember at the time thinking, there was not scandal, but just almost like kind of hedonism and stuff like that going on around the band. Was it as bad as that, or was it just you feel that you were all just having an absolute ball of it, really?
Yeah, it was as bad as that, or as good as that. We saw. No, the thing was, we all, we'd all known each other from Cardiff, where there was a fairly energetic drinking and partying scene, to be fair, that we were all very much fond of. And in that first year, '96, I joined at the end of '95, and in '96 we released 5 singles from Way Beyond Blue, and we toured all 5 of them. And we did festivals and did European festivals, and a couple of support slots with 6 Foot Dolls, and I think it was Shed 7 as well. And we started that year, we started touring on the 3rd of January in Barron's nightclub in Swansea, which was made famous as a scene in the film Twin Town with it.
Yeah.
And we finished on, I think it was the 22nd of December. And it was just non-stop. It nearly damn near killed us. I mean, I remember getting home for Christmas. I think I just lay on a sofa for 2 weeks. I just couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
But the thing is it doesn't matter if you're young, old, or in between. If somebody suddenly gives you a chance to do that, then that's what things were like at that time. Anyway, after every single gig, there'd be an after show. After every single after show, somebody would drag you to a nightclub, would get you in for free, and then next thing you knew, it was time to do it all over again the next day. You got a bit of a constitution. Luckily, we were a lot younger than we are now.
Yeah.
With that now, I think there'd be. I think we lasted about 3 days, to be honest with you.
You give it a good shot though, wouldn't you?
I'd give it a go, but only for 3 days. Yeah.
When songs pop up like Road Rage and Mulder and Scully and things, which are now, I guess, just classics, still fill dance floors or indie clubs and things now, don't they? And I'll always remember them and love them, But when they happen in like rehearsal studios and things, do you have a feeling about them straight away, or is it something that grows on you?
It's difficult to tell, because quite often, even songs as well known as those go through quite a few incarnations before they get to be in the released version. For example, Mulder and Scully, when we first put it together, it was much, much slower. And it was only when we came to do the album that we decided to do it a lot at the tempo that it is at now. So it was a good song, but it lacked the excitement of the version that we eventually released. Road Rage was different, because Mark and Keris had started writing Road Rage at a piano. And Mark came in one day into a rehearsal room, which used to rehearse by Welsh National Opera in Cardiff under a railway bridge, in this little rehearsal studio. And he literally played Road Rage beginning to end, verses, choruses, middle eight, outro, the lot. I remember thinking straight away then, that's going to be really good. And it was like, come on, let us at it. Let's work it and do the best we can for. I knew straight away that was a good song.
And the kudos that came with it, obviously those feelings about it, potentially going to do well, come when you get nominations for what was the Brit Awards and Ivor Novello and the Q Awards and things. And could you all quite believe it, or was it something do you feel like you deserved?
Well, the thing was, going back to what I said about touring Way Beyond Blue, where we literally did 230, 240 gigs in a year, and at the end of the year, we'd sold 18,000 copies of that album, and we used to joke that it would have been cheaper to have hired a helicopter and just gone off and dropped a copy to everybody. But when we were making International Velvet, because of you say 18,000 albums now, it sounds like quite a lot. I mean, you can get number one album with 6,000 sales now, so 18,000 a year isn't that bad. But when you sign to a huge American record label, it's well below expectations. So we went off to make International Velvet, and we just left to our own devices. Nobody from the record company came down. Nobody from the management came down. We just went down to Marna Valley Studios and we just cracked on with it. And all the way through, I just remember thinking, oh, this is amazing. This album's going to be huge. And then right at the end, I had this massive panic. And we were right to have that panic because we sent it to the record label and they were like, what's this? What is, what's this all about? You're meant to be some indie band. What's all this? What's all this? Yeah. And it was a massive, oh my God, have we blown it sort of thing? And then a couple of weeks later, they got back to us and they were like, oh, no, we love it. And you're never quite sure what's gone on in that intervening period. But we were all really, really proud of that record and proud of the work that we put in. We worked really hard on not just the songwriting, but arranging the songs, editing bits in, editing bits out, this bit could be better. There was a lot of, it wasn't just write 12 songs and go in and out and do an album. We wrote 22 songs and we went in and we picked the best of the best. And we worked really, really hard at, editing, arranging, there's a really good hook there. We should do that more often. It wasn't just walk in and bang them out. There was, a lot of that kind of pre-production and, hone in the songs to make them hit home, if you see what I mean.
But then did you put yourself under a bit more pressure then with the following albums that after International Velvet?
Yeah, that's the thing is if International Velvet was a surprise, and it was a lovely surprise, and it went to number one in the UK and produced I don't know how many hit singles, but in the same way as we'd felt no pressure at all making that record because of the relative lack of success of the first album, you suddenly realize that there's an awful lot more pressure when you come to the third. You get asked to go for marketing meetings with people at the record company, and then it's like, hang on, nobody's ever asked us to go to one of these before. What do you think we have got to contribute to a marketing meeting? It was a strange thing, and it's always, I think any band will tell you this, it is hard to follow up a really successful album, especially one as relatively early on in your career. It's funny because Tidal, the streaming service,
have
just got hold of the MQAs, the Master Quality Audios, for the 4 Warner's albums. And I've been really pleasantly surprised listening back to them, because it's the first time I've listened to, Equally Cursed and Blessed since probably it came out. I've never gone back and listened to it again. And I was really surprised by how good it was. But there was a definite feeling from the record company of, oh, it's not quite, where's the Molten Scully, where's the Road Rage? Because, of course, we gave them Dead from the Waist Down, which was sort of this big sort of orchestral sweeping lament, if you like. And they were like, we could do with some, some indie bangers, please. Except that people didn't used to say indie bangers. That's a recent, I thought I'd use that term just to show that I
still down with the kids.
I'm definitely not down. I'm not even not even down with my kids, for heaven's sake. But no, it was a bit of a change. It was a much more reflective album, and that's the thing is you're always aware that when you fill an album with sort of mid-paced songs, that however well they're crafted and however much work you put into, you know, the lyrics and the arrangements and that, is that if you've established your name as, oh, you know, the band who do Mulder and Scully, the band who do Road Rage, that if you suddenly deliver an album of fairly mid-tempo songs, that there are some people who are going to be disappointed.
When Catatonia did sort of come to an end, and obviously it wasn't as, I would say, it wasn't a split as such, but it was just kind of like a shelving almost, wasn't it? Do you think?
It's a polite way of putting it.
Yeah. How were you feeling? I know obviously when any band sort of stops and you've got quite a lot of success, that it could be quite difficult. But were you expecting it, or were you how were you feeling about it?
Well, the thing was, we'd not long finished an album, and we released a single on the Monday, Stone by Stone, and then the album Paper Scissors Stone was going to follow on the following Monday. And I got a phone call from the Western Mail, which is the national newspaper in Wales, and they said, "Oh, can we have a quote about the band splitting up?" And I said, "Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about." And I phoned the management, and they said, "Oh yeah, Warner's have just released a statement." And I remember thinking, "Oh, okay, that's it." But a couple of days later, the Twin Towers September the 11th happened. So it sort of, it kind of, you know, there are more important things to worry about. It sort of cleared the decks, really, and you know, just kind of got on with it, really. I mean, you know, it was. I think with any band, you can sort of see, you know, there was a time and a place for it. You know, the Sex Pistols only made one album. I mean, there was plenty that was released afterwards, but that one album did the job, and I still listen to that album at least once a month. And I don't think to myself, "Oh, it's a shame they didn't do more albums," you know. There's a time and place with bands and artists and music, and sometimes that course runs very quickly, and it's all condensed and compressed, and sometimes it can last for years. Like in the, you know, you compare the Beatles and the Stones. You know, Beatles were only together for 6 years, or the recording career was 6 years, and then, you know, the Stones had, you know, still going. Yeah, there's a time and a place, and I felt, yeah, that it's run its course now, and you know, I accepted that, but I was sad about it, because, you know, you look back on any band, and you can always say, "Oh, you know," I'm sure you've heard this from countless contributors to this podcast, who, you know, they will describe it as the best of times and the worst of times, that the good times are great and the bad times can be really horrible. But that's part of what gives it that, you know, that sort of precious time, and that, and you look back, I can look back on it now and say, yeah, there was a reason why those bad things happened, and there's a reason why the good things happened. It's all part of the, you know, the balance of being in a band. It's like a family or a marriage.
You've taken, I guess, that element of songwriting and the musical career that you were kind of developing within Catatonia, and then you took it to a completely different place. Would you say? I mean, you had experience with sort of broadcasting and on television as well with the Wow Factor. But I mean, obviously, and also just, you know, moving into different territories. There was, and obviously the supergroup, if you don't mind me calling it, the Stand.
Right.
What were you kind of thinking at that kind of points? Were you thinking where musically where were you going to fit, or did you just know that you wanted to go in a sort of songwriting and composing direction?
Well, the thing is, for the first year after the band split, I didn't really do anything, because I had a son who had been born the year before while we'd been making the album, and I'd been away for more or less a year and just hadn't had a chance to be at home. So for the first year, I didn't really do anything. I just knocked around the house, and then I got a phone call asking me, did I want to contribute to a TV program, which turned out to be Wow Factor, which, for people who don't know, was like a Welsh version of Pop Stars or what do you call it?
X
Pop
Factor.
Idol.
Oh, Pop
Yeah,
Idol. Yeah.
yeah, something like that. And from there, I then got asked to produce a few music TV programs. So bizarrely, I ended up working as like a freelance TV producer, having absolutely no idea of what I was doing. Literally, not a clue. I would turn up for work and just march around the office on my phone, shouting at people because I didn't know what else to do. And then eventually, I think they realised that I didn't know what I was doing, and I sort of got shifted sideways into doing music for things. And I scored a couple of films, but never really felt that at home in that world, really, because I know you've probably interviewed people yourselves who go, oh God, I'd love to score a film in that, but it's like, be careful what you wish for. Is what I would say. I love doing it, and it's really challenging, but it takes such a chunk of time to do, and especially when you're doing it on your own or with one other person, and the expectations of film productions is that you are available pretty much 24/7 to answer the questions of editors, producers, directors, people who are funding the film, commissioning editors, and it wasn't a way that I particularly liked working. I liked just getting on with it and then presenting somebody with the finished, ta-da, there it is.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that film and drama composition don't work like that. You've kind of got about 8 people looking over your shoulder all the time. And yeah, you have to devote huge chunks of time, like months at a time, to a project where you haven't got time to do anything else. And I just didn't, I didn't really warm to that way of doing things. I mean, there's another point of view which just tells you that I just don't like people telling me what to do musically, which and that was a big surprise to me when you make, I just always assumed that the person who was scoring a film would just be allowed to do whatever they wanted, but it's very, very far from the truth. In fact, you've usually got at least 4 people telling you different ideas of what they want from the same scene, and I got a bit tired of doing it after 1 or 2.
I had Richard Parfitt on the show last season, and realised
Parfitt, the best guitarist who I've ever been in a room with. He really is fantastic. He's a great musician. He's a very, very good friend of mine as well. Yeah, since 95, 96. Yeah, wonderful fella.
Well, I hadn't realised the connection that you both have, obviously friends and musicians together, but with the Duffy story as well, because he spoke a bit about that when we talked about it. But what was your involvement there, if you don't mind me asking?
I was coming out of dentists in Cardiff. I just had like 3 teeth out or something, and I literally, I'd had so many injections of anaesthetic, I couldn't move my face, let alone talk. And he stopped me. And he's so angry. He goes, "Oh yeah, come on, we got to get together, write some songs, man, write some songs." I was going, "Richard," I'm pointing at my mouth, going, "Oh, come on." Anyway, so we did indeed get together and write some songs, and we wrote 4 or 5 songs, and then we thought, well, we should look for somebody to sing them, and I think we spoke to a few people. We just weren't getting anywhere. The first person we wanted to do it was Gwenna Saunders, who at the time was in the Pipettes, and we were told by her manager that he'd break our legs if we approached her, because obviously he had a successful band on his books. Andy Barding, his name is, and he's a good friend of Parfitt and mine. So he was only joking when he said that. I assume you never really know with band managers. And we were just kept on drawing blanks, and eventually, in desperation, I said, "Well, there was this girl on the last series of Wow Factor who was amazing, and I'm not sure if it's going to suit." And he was like, "Oh no, I'm not touching anybody, and anything to do with TV talent shows." And I said, "Well, let's have a look." So I went to the TV company, and they gave me a DVD, and he was like, "Right, you should just a complete 180." He said, "Right, let's drive up to North Wales and see you now." It's like, hang on a minute, Rich. A minute ago, you weren't touching anything that was in a... And that's how it happened. We drove up there. We literally took... We took 2 guitars with us, played her a couple of songs, and she said, "Yeah." and we started recording, and we played the stuff to Rough Trade Records, to Jeanette Lee and to Jeff Travis, and Jeanette signed her up, signed her to Rough Trade Management, and put her to work with Bernard Butler. So yeah, we kind of, I suppose we brought her to the attention of Jeff and Jeanette at Rough Trade. But I'll be quite honest, which is that I couldn't have taken that project in the direction which Jeanette did, because that's what Jeanette does, is she sees, you know, the big picture of things, and sees how artists should be presented and how they should look, how they should sign. You know, she's made a career doing that, and that was something that was, you know, was so far outside what I wanted to do that I was glad she did it. You know,
your solo project that you're doing at the moment, the Don Ya Yarn.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
why? That's a good question.
No, I'm trying to.
You go, Owen, this Don Yaya project you're doing. Why?
I'm trying. It's
absolutely. What it is.
It's that. Well, I was just saying. It sounds. I mean, the one I've heard online is right up my street, and I was like,
good.
This is. I mean, in terms of just the layering and the musicality of it, and just the. It's not, I wouldn't say whimsical, but there's the vocal on it is just quite sublime. It's lovely. And I was thinking, well, you know, you've obviously had to take a transition then from being, you know, songwriter, you know, as you say, like a sidekick, if, as you say, to somebody else who's going to sing, making that transition. And Jim McCulloch was talking to me as well recently about doing the same thing for his solo album from Soup Dragons, about, you know, finding his voice, actually singing it, and having the confidence to sing, and actually thinking, this isn't actually that bad. I can actually do this. And did you have a similar moment with you? Because it sounds to me like that you've been singing like this all your life. You wouldn't think this is something that's potentially new to you.
Well, my mum always used to say that there are people who can hold a tune and there are people who can sing. I'm definitely in the hold a tune section, and I'd always sung on demos and, you know, did backing vocals and all the rest of it. But literally the only, why do I keep on saying literally? I thought I got out of that habit. Never mind.
I'll edit it out.
Yeah, no, leave it in for comedy value. It literally is something people used to say in the 90s. It's literally this. It's literally that.
Yeah.
So I've forgotten what I'm saying now. Yeah, no, it was kind of forced upon me. I had a couple of songs that I would normally have gone looking for somebody to demo or for somebody to sing, and of course, because of lockdown, it's you can record vocals online, but it's very, very difficult. It's not, you know, it's something that you need to be in a room with somebody to be able to do. So I thought, right, I'm going to take the bull by the horns. I'm going to give it a go myself. And like most people who aren't experienced, you know, lead singers, front people of bands, it takes a while to get over the sound of your own voice. I'm sure Jim would say exactly the same thing, because he's in a similar position, being, you know, a sideman to people from, you know, he was in Superstar as well, wasn't he, Jim?
Yep.
He was, yeah. So he'd have been, you know, playing guitar in the Soup Dragons in Superstar. So people don't know what his voice sounds like and don't know if he can sing or not. And it is a bit of a leap of faith. And I'm sure Jim will find the same thing, and I'm sure lots and lots of other people in our position have found the same thing, which is it's a bit of a leap of faith. It takes a bit of getting used to, and then eventually, after a bit of this and a bit of that, you get to a point where you go, actually, that sounds all right. That sounds like a record. You know, I'm not trying to be the best singer in the world, but it sounds like a record, so that makes me happy.
It's kind of got almost like a Beach Boysy feel to it, and, you know, I was expecting to go, yeah, that's what I was after.
I've had a few people say that it sounds kind of John Lennon-ish, which is good. And again, that's somebody who really didn't like the sound of his own voice either, and would constantly ask George Martin to smother it in reverb and slapback delay and double tracks and stuff, all of which are the tricks that I use to get over the fact that I can't stand the sound of my own voice. It's funny, you just, what you do is you find, oh, let me find somebody else who really didn't like the sound of their own voice. Ah, John Lennon, yeah, I'll use all the tricks he did, and it'll turn out all right in the end.
But the recording of it then, was this recorded pre-pandemic, or is this done during as
No,
well?
I yeah, I did it during, yeah. I can actually, I could, if we were on video, I could actually show you what is laughingly referred to as my studio. Is literally a room. If I sit down on a chair in the room, I can touch all four walls of the room. It's just about big enough to get a computer, an interface, a pair of studio monitors, and a small keyboard in. And then if I then have to play guitar, I have to open the door then and sit half in the room. But I like it, you know, because somebody, I was doing, I did a feature again for the Western Mail, the national newspaper of Wales, and they sent a photographer over, and the first thing the photographer said was, can we take some photos in the studio? And I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. So the photographer came into the house, and I opened the door to the tiny room. The look on his face, it was just like this crashing disappointment of like, oh, I was expecting a recording studio, not like a room with a child's desk, a stool, and some speakers and some records in it. You know, she looked pretty crushed, and so and bless her, she was so polite. She took a few photos in there and went, right, let's go somewhere else. It's obvious that he was just thinking, oh, I'll take a few photos so he's not offended, but these aren't going to make the magazine, obviously, because it looks nothing like a recording studio.
So you've got the two singles, Pale Moon and then It's You. Are they?
Yeah.
And the album. When's the album due?
Well, I've been asked if I'm trying to build towards doing an album. I've got another single ready to come out, but I haven't had a chance to do a video for it yet because I shoot the videos on my phone. Because I am literally a one-man band. I record it all, and I engineer it and mix it and master it, and then I do the same with the videos. So the first video, the video for It's You, I shot when my wife and I were on holiday in our camper van, and I don't think she realised that I was going to spend the holiday filming a video. And she hadn't been on holiday for like over a year. It was like, yeah, we're going on holiday. It's going to be great. We're going to have all this time to relax, and I'm going to be able to shoot a video. And she said, you what? I said, well, I'm going to try and shoot a video while we're on a holiday. And yeah, I had one of those looks, but it was a very easy video to make. I just did lots of very, very random shots of stuff that I saw on holiday, made it look as old fashioned as I could, and then cut it all together, and that was the video. So that's the way I make videos. But I've got another single ready to go, and called Kiss Kiss Goodbye, which sounds kind of like Bondy, doesn't it? But it's not Bondy at all, or Bond-like. So as soon as I've done a video for it, when I can raise my lazy butt to do the video, I will put out the next single. But I think the album's a much more long-term project. What I'd like to do before then is do 4 singles as a sort of like a 12-inch EP, going back to the classic EPs of the 90s where you'd get 2 tracks on one side and 2 tracks on another, because so far I've not been able to do physical releases of these.
Yeah.
And obviously being a an indie kid from the 90s, I would love to. I'd love to do that. I'd love to go back to a nice sleeve, nice proper 12-inch, make it sound good, make it look good. So I think the albums. I'm not in the Mark Roberts turning out 4 albums in 2 years. Not capable of that.
So, do you think you'd ever play live this sort of material live, or this project live with a band?
I don't know. The thing is, I've not had to worry about that, and nobody's even asked, because obviously I started it during lockdown when you couldn't do gigs, and then the singles have been released during lockdown where you can't do gigs. It's kind of been a perfect project for a one-man band because there's no pressure to go out and play it. It'd be quite tricky to do it live. I'd have to get I'd have to get a few people in, or do it as a karaoke show, maybe. Just literally walk on stage, plonk a CD in a CD DJ booth, and just stand there singing the songs. I kind of like the idea of doing it really cheekily, sillily, cheaply. You know, really, really cheesy and crass. That's the thing. I live in a world where I have to make the records and the videos, but what I'd like to do is to live in a world where I can invite 6 musicians to join me and recording studios. But
Well, Owen, I'll let you go off into the dark night in Wales.
That was very Dylan Thomas-esque. That was. What is it? Do not go into the dark night. Something like that. I was never very good at poetry in school, I'm afraid.
Me neither. It's been great catching up with what you've been doing, and like I say, I really have enjoyed listening to Don Yaya and the stuff. It's right up my street.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. Thanks very much, Chris.
And thanks for talking about Catatonia and everything else as well. It's been brilliant.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Trip down memory lane, and all the best for the podcast. You've had some great people on, and now you've had me on, which is a huge letdown. But at least people can go back and they can listen to all the good guests that you've had, and hopefully I haven't ruined your successful award-winning podcast. And then you'll be back next week.
Let's hope so.
This temporary blip will be forgotten. Okay, thanks very much, Chris.
All right, mate. Bye. I had so much fun recording that interview with Owen. It was fantastic. Please check out the solo recordings, Don Yaya. As I said at the beginning of the interview, I've put all the links in the show notes to that. It's really great stuff. So here are all the ways that you can support the podcast. And this bit's boring, isn't it? Sorry, I keep doing this every week. But anyway, yes, I'm on social media, so you can follow me there on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. If you want to support the podcast financially, you can as well. So there's like a donation page that I have set up, and that link is in the show notes. You can buy me a virtual coffee. And finally, the third thing that you can do that really helps is to leave a review and rate the podcast on whatever device you're listening to it on. It really helps. Well, that's it for another episode. It's been an absolute blast so far this season. I hope you're really enjoying it. I'll be back next week, all being well, with another one. So until then, see you soon.